The 2023 Formula One season is approaching much faster than you think. The pre-season test happens in Bahrain at the end of February, and then the following Sunday at the start of March, it will be lights out and away we go for the season opener. 2022 was a season of huge upheaval due to the massive technical regulation changes. In comparison, 2023 won't be quite so dramatic. Though do not let that fool you into thinking nothing is going to change, as there are some big rule changes that will have a massive impact on the sport. There is plenty to talk when it comes about the 2023 changes. There are new drivers, and many of them are switch teams. The team principals have played musical chairs and we're still waiting for Jos Capito's replacement to be announced, and plenty of the courses have had changes to their layouts or are just brand new. The Las Vegas Grand Prix on Saturday, the 28th of November, is the biggest change here and is the first to be held on a Saturday in decades. If you like a good party, then this is definitely the race for you because it's going to be wild. All of that is still to come, but the rule changes are here now, and the teams are already having to deal with the consequences of the changes. We are going to cover changes to grid penalties, tire allowances, and sprint races. But first, let's take a look at the thing giving every team's designers nightmares. That honor goes to the technical regulation changes. After the major technical regulation changes for 2022, the teams will naturally have been relieved to have relatively static regulations for which to design their 2023 cars for. However, there are some minor, but not insignificant changes to the technical regulations for this year. In a bid to reduce the severe aerodynamic porpoising seen with these modern ground effect Formula One cars at the start of last season, the FIA has introduced tougher and more stringent floor deflection tests to measure how much the car floors are flexing under aerodynamic load. They've also raised the floor edges by 15 millimeters to help alleviate the problem. At the start of the 2022 season, we witnessed a number of cars suffering from porpoising. By the time we got to Baku, we saw many cars having suffered the most consequences of this aerodynamic jolts. The FIA was convinced that it was a safety risk that the teams couldn't solve themselves, after the Mercedes team spent weeks answering every question asked of them with complaints about it. In reality, many teams had already solved the problem by then, and once everyone returned from their summer holidays for the Belgian Grand Prix, it was pretty much gone from the grid. Many team bosses and people close to the sport think the FIA should never have gotten involved and only did so because one of the most popular teams on the grid made it such a big problem. Mercedes have been accused of preventing porpoising issues from being solved, despite suffering from the issue throughout 2022. Formula One Chief Technical Officer Pat Symonds believes the FIA overreacted after Mercedes complained about the issue after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He told the media, "I think the FIA overreacted a bit after Baku. In Baku, we saw the worst effects because a team tried something that didn't work and then went public quite loudly. If the FIA hadn't intervened, the problems would have been solved. Most teams now understand how to control the bouncing. The teams first had to solve this problem before they could work on their aerodynamics. Bouncing is not purely an aerodynamic problem. There's also a lot of mechanics involved. For example, suspension stiffness." That's a pretty bold statement from someone so senior within Formula One, and shows just how strong the sentiment is that this rule change was a result of the FIA caving to outside pressure. It will be interesting to see how it affects the cars this year, because the change will have a huge impact on the aerodynamics of the floors and the rear ends. There are other rule changes beyond those aimed at stopping porpoising, though teams will also have more freedom under the regulations to alter the homologated gearbox designs for 2023. In the case of materials, processes, or proprietary parts becoming unavailable, or having their use restricted for health and safety reasons. What this rule changes in response to, we don't know that as of yet. Presumably, the effect of COVID-19 on global supply chains has made some metal or equipment extremely hard to get a hold of. There have been changes to the technical regulations that focus on driver safety that are warranted. Mirrors have been made larger to reduce blind spots, while car roll hoops will be strengthened following the collapse of the roll hoop on Joe Guanyu's Alfa Romeo during his horrifying crash at the start of the British Grand Prix. Thankfully, the halo saved Joe's life that time, but anything that reduces the risk of another driver's death is an excellent change in our opinion. Another little change that might have gone under your radar is the minimum weight of the cars being reduced by 2 kilograms. If you throw your mind back to the start of the 2022 season, you might remember that all of the teams were overweight except for Alfa Romeo, and after a number of complaints, the FIA raised the minimum weight to make it easier for teams to hit it. Max Verstappen's DRS flap failing twice due to Red Bull's weight loss and a lack of paint on a lot of cars showed us how hard it was to get to the minimum weight. But according to reports, they pretty much all managed it by the end of the season. What about the other changes we mentioned earlier in terms of the sporting regulations? There are some minor tweaks to the rules the FIA have clarified. The procedure for applying grid penalties in the event of large numbers of drivers all serving penalties at the same event, such as at Spa-Francorchamps and Monza last year. You know that the rules are too convoluted when the entire F1 world, including the teams themselves, have absolutely no idea how they work. So this change is excellent. Drivers who receive more than 15 cumulative grid position penalties or have been penalized to start at the back of the grid. They will start behind any other classified driver. In 2 rounds this season, Formula 1 will trial a revised qualifying format. The qualifying format will remain functionally identical, however drivers will only be permitted to run hard tires in Q1. Medium tires will be mandatory in Q2, and drivers will only be allowed to use softs in Q3. The system is designed to help make F1's use of its tire compounds over a weekend less wasteful. Pirelli boss Mario Isola believes it's more sustainable for the tire manufacturer. "We got the proposal for next year," Isola said. "It is my favorite scenario. We are talking about durability. Currently, with the current regulations, you have to be careful with the soft tire for qualifying and you can't use it for the race. If you allocate 2 sets of hards for Q1, 2 sets of mediums for Q2, and 2 sets of softs for Q3, you still have 6 sets for the race. That's perfect. We save a lot of tires with that, without disrupting the F1 show." DRS will now be activated after a single lap of green flag racing this season, rather than the previous 2 laps, but only during the sprint races. The FIA will roll out this change to Grand Prix in 2023. This change would make the laps after yellow far more important with how close the cars are after bunching up behind a safety car, giving the drivers DRS sooner. We'll see more overtakes happen. Well, that's the theory anyway. The final element of the regulations is the financial regulations will also be slightly revised for the new season. The 2022 budget cap was set at $141.2 million for the year with 22 rounds. But in 2023, the total limit for teams will be reduced to $137.4 million, assuming the 23 rounds currently confirmed to be taking place go ahead. Finally, F1 has announced that there will be a full 6 sprint races for weekends across the 2023 F1 season. Get ready for racing Saturdays at Baku at the end of April, the Red Bull Ring on the first weekend of July, Spa at the end of July, Qatar at the start of October, Circuit of the Americas at the end of October, and Interlagos at the start of November. I know this one is definitely going to split opinions. Some people love the sprint race and the added excitement of racing on Saturday and qualifying on Friday. Some people hate it because the sprint race feels a bit empty due to the risk of losing your place on the grid for Sunday's race. Are you in for more sprint races, or is that a change you really didn't want to happen? How do you feel about the changing technical regulations to solve porpoising? Let us know your opinion in the comments down below. Thank you for watching our video today, and if you enjoy our content, subscribe to the channel and have that notifications bell turned on to be made aware of our future uploads, as we have plenty coming up for you about the 2023 Formula 1 season.